This is the image they tried to bury. A nearly 1.5-mile cable-stayed bridge, gleaming white steel towers rising above the Detroit River, connecting the most important trade corridor in North America. Fully built, fully paid for, and fully connected to the interstate systems on both sides of the border. Canada funded every single dollar of it, over 6.4 billion Canadian dollars, 8 years of construction. And now, in February 2026, and with the ribbon almost in hand, a man with a social media account threatened to block it from ever opening. The president's post landed on a Monday night. "I will not allow this bridge to open until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them, and also, importantly, Canada treats the United States with the fairness and respect that we deserve," Trump wrote. Washington expected Canada to flinch. Canada did not flinch. Mark Carney stepped in front of reporters the next morning and said this: "Canada, of course, paid for the construction of the bridge, over $4 billion. The ownership is shared between the state of Michigan and the government of Canada." That is the answer that stunned Washington. Not a threat, not outrage, not a demand. Just the facts. Delivered with the calm precision of a man who has managed the monetary policy of 2 G7 nations and has absolutely no interest in pretending that a lie is a negotiating position. Canada paid for it. Michigan owns half of it. The United States already has what it is asking for. There is nothing to negotiate. There never was. Buckle up, because what just happened at that bridge is not a story about infrastructure. It is a story about power, leverage, corruption, and what it looks like when a great nation starts operating on information that is 40 years out of date. Let me explain the architecture of this moment, because it is far bigger than the cable stays and the concrete. The Detroit-Windsor corridor is not just a river crossing. It is the central nervous system of North American automotive production. The crossings between Detroit and Windsor carry nearly 25% of all truck traffic at the Canada-United States border. Automotive trade between the two countries has climbed from $32 billion in 1995 to $51 billion in 2023. The supply chains of the American car industry, the Ford F-150, the Chevy Silverado, every component that goes into every vehicle rolling off a Michigan assembly line. They move through this corridor. More than 25% of all United States-Canada trade flows through this single corridor. Let that sink in for a moment. One corridor, one river, one choke point. And for nearly a century, one privately owned bridge has controlled it. That bridge is the Ambassador Bridge. Opened in 1929. Aging, congested, monopolized. The Ambassador Bridge has been criticized for its monopoly status, as large trucks are not permitted to use the tunnel, and its private ownership by billionaire Manuel Maroon and poor maintenance record. Both the bridge and the road tunnel lack direct highway connections on the Canadian side, with city streets and traffic lights between them and Ontario Highway 401. This is the infrastructure reality that the Gordie Howe International Bridge was designed to solve. Not as a favor, not as a gesture of goodwill, as an economic and national security imperative. The auto industry depends on just-in-time logistics. Parts cross the Detroit River sometimes multiple times during the manufacturing process. A single point of failure in that corridor does not just cause traffic jams. It shuts down assembly lines. It costs automakers millions per hour. Any delay at the border ripples quickly through factories in Detroit, Lansing, Flint, and beyond. So in 2004, the United States and Canadian federal governments made a joint announcement. A new bridge would be built. It took 8 years to negotiate the financing arrangement. In 2012, a Republican governor, Rick Snyder, struck the deal. Canada would pay for everything. In exchange, Michigan and Canada would jointly own the bridge. The tolls would repay Canada's construction costs, and after that, the proceeds would split. Trump's administration already endorsed this arrangement. In February 2017, Early in his first presidency, he issued a joint statement with then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in which they said they looked forward to the expeditious completion of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, which would serve as a vital economic link between the two countries. Now let us talk about what changed, because something changed, and it was not the facts about the bridge. Canada financed the $5.7 billion project. The bridge is jointly owned by Canada and the state of Michigan. The Canadian government planned to recoup the funding through toll revenue. Every sentence of that paragraph is something Trump claimed was false. Every sentence of that paragraph is documented, confirmed by the Michigan Governor's office, confirmed by the Windsor Mayor, and confirmed by the former Republican governor who negotiated the deal. The bridge's ownership is already split between the state of Michigan and Canada. As government documents show, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's office and Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens confirmed to CNN, Carney told reporters, and Republican former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder confirmed. Trump stated in his Truth Social post that Canada owns both sides of the bridge and built it with, quote, virtually no U.S. content. Both claims are factually incorrect. Both were immediately refuted. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens confirmed that U.S. steel was used in the construction of the bridge on the Michigan side of the river. It's just insane, Dilkens said. I really can't believe what I'm reading. Here is what the administration did not anticipate. The receipts were already public. Now let us talk about what actually happened on February 9, 2026, because the timeline of this story tells you something, and it tells you everything. The New York Times reported that on Monday, February 9th, Matthew Moran, owner of the Ambassador Bridge, met with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington. Lutnick then spoke with Trump over the phone. That same day, Trump posted on Truth Social threatening to block the Gordie Howe Bridge. That is not a coincidence. That is a sequence, U.S. Election records show Moran has donated over $600,000 to Trump's presidential campaigns and related fundraising committees, as well as to the Republican Party, since 2019. More than that, new campaign finance disclosures revealed that Moran gave $1 million to Super PAC MAGA Inc., which supports Trump, on January 16th, less than a month before Trump issued his Gordie Howe threat. $1 million. January 16th. February 9th, the meeting with Lutnick. February 9th, the phone call to Trump. February 9th, the Truth Social post. The math is merciless. Former Governor Rick Snyder, who negotiated the 2012 crossing agreement that created the project, wrote in an op-ed that if the opening is delayed or stopped, there is one big winner, the Moran family and the Ambassador Bridge Company. Over the decades, they have spent millions trying to stop the Gordie Howe International Bridge. Every day, they make much more money at the public's expense. This is not a story about trade fairness. This is not a story about American interests. This is a story about a billionaire donor, a bridge monopoly, and a White House that answers the phone when the money calls. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee opened an investigation into whether Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's reported meeting with Moran influenced the Trump administration's actions on the Gordie Howe Bridge. It appears that you may have used your influence as a donor to President Donald Trump to jeopardize American commerce to protect your company's bottom line. The committee's letter stated, "Let us be precise about what is at stake here, because this is where the story stops being a Washington drama and starts becoming a crisis for ordinary Americans." A new analysis from the Anderson Economic Group of East Lansing found that direct losses from delaying the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge could hit $7 million per week. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority stands to lose $5 million per week if the project is delayed. $7 million per week. That is $364 million per year in direct losses alone. And that number, as the analysts were careful to note, captures only a fraction of the damage. And the direct costs are only a fraction of the costs to the automotive industry, as well as to the agricultural, tourism, and other industries dependent on efficient crossing of the United States-Canada border. Now, here is the secondary effect that nobody on cable news is discussing. The Ambassador Bridge is a 97-year-old structure. It carries the weight of North America's most important trade corridor on aging suspension cables. A single corridor for commercial traffic is vulnerable. The existing Ambassador Bridge, privately owned by the Moran family, has served as the primary commercial crossing for decades. But manufacturers have long raised concerns about congestion, aging infrastructure, and lack of redundancy. Without the Gordie Howe Bridge as an alternative, if the Ambassador Bridge closes, for maintenance, for weather, for structural failure, and for another protest blockade like the one in 2022, the entire North American automotive supply chain has exactly 0 options. Cars stop being built. Not in Windsor, in Detroit, in Lansing, in Flint, in every assembly plant that relies on parts crossing that river. This is not an abstraction. This is the death of a supply chain. Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin, a Democrat, said, "So to shoot yourself in the foot and threaten the Gordie Howe Bridge means that this guy has completely lost the plot on what's good for us versus just what's spite against the Canadians." Now here is what Carney understood that Trump apparently did not. The bridge is already built. It is already standing. It is already connected to the interstate system on both sides. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens said he's confident the bridge will open since it is already built. It is fully constructed and fully connected to the interstate systems on both sides of the border. Dilkens told CNN, "You cannot unbuild a bridge with a Truth Social post. The only mechanism Trump has to actually block the bridge is a presidential permit, an executive order issued in 2013 that authorized construction and operation. The presidential permit authorizing construction and operation of a new bridge linking Detroit with Windsor was issued in 2013, but as with any executive order, it can be revoked by the president. Revoking it would trigger years of litigation. It would invite damages claims from Canada. It would almost certainly constitute a violation of the Canada-Michigan Crossing Agreement, a binding international instrument, and it would hand American adversaries the most devastating piece of propaganda imaginable. The United States, seizing a bridge it did not pay for, built by its closest ally because a billionaire donor asked them to. Every intelligence analyst in Washington who is watching this story understands the signal it sends to the world. If the United States can retroactively claim ownership of infrastructure it did not finance, in violation of signed agreements, at the request of a campaign donor, then no international agreement with the United States is worth the paper it is printed on. That is not hyperbole. That is the logical consequence of the precedent. Here is the historical parallel. Note, because this pattern is ancient and the ending is always the same. In the 1840s, the British government attempted to stop American manufacturers from accessing British industrial technology by banning the export of machinery and skilled workers. They called it protecting British interests. Within 2 decades, American manufacturing had not just caught up, it had surpassed Britain entirely. The attempt to hoard the advantage accelerated its transfer. Capital finds a way. So does infrastructure. Canada paid $6.4 billion to build a bridge that serves North American trade. The United States already owns half of it by binding legal agreement. The attempt to renegotiate that agreement by threatening to block the bridge's opening did not make the United States more powerful. It made Canada look like the adult in the room, and it made Washington look like it is being run by a 95-year-old bridge monopoly from Detroit. Now let us talk about Carney. Because his response to this situation is a masterclass in what competence looks like when it is under pressure. Carney said he had a positive conversation with Trump and emphasized the cooperation between the two neighbors, with Canadian and American steel, as well as workers from both countries involved in the construction. "We very much look forward to the bridge opening," Carney said. "What is particularly important, of course, is the commerce, the tourism and the travel of Canadians and Americans who will cross that bridge. He did not escalate. He did not moralize. He corrected the factual record with the precision of someone who knows that calm authority is more devastating than outrage. He laid out the facts. Canada paid, Michigan co-owns, both nations' workers built it. And then he used the word positive to describe a conversation that had followed a post calling everything he represents unfair and exploitative. That is not weakness. That is the scalpel. Carney said he told Trump that Canadians paid for the bridge in full, that the United States already has an ownership stake, and that the project was built by workers and with materials from both sides of the border. This is a great example of cooperation between our countries, he said. Compare that to what Trump's own trade representative knew when asked to explain the situation. Trump's trade representative Jamieson Greer, and during an appearance on Fox Business on Tuesday, said he did not know the details of the bridge agreement. The United States trade representative, the person whose job is to know every detail of every trade agreement with every nation on earth, did not know the details of the bridge agreement, the agreement that has been public, binding international law since 2012, 14 years. The deal has been public for 14 years. And the administration that threatened to block the bridge because of the deal did not know what the deal said. Here is the deeper issue, and this is the thing that should terrify you more than any headline. What you are watching in the Gordie Howe confrontation is not just a dispute about a bridge. It is a diagnostic. It is a test of whether the executive branch of the United States government is capable of conducting basic due diligence before issuing ultimatums to its closest trading partner. And the answer revealed by this episode is not reassuring. The post came after a donor meeting. It contained factual claims that were false on their face, contradicted by publicly available documents, by the governor of the affected state, by the Republican former governor who negotiated the deal, by the mayor of Windsor, and by basic reading of the 2012 crossing agreement. The trade representative did not know the details. The president claimed America gets absolutely nothing from a bridge that Michigan already legally owns half of, and the mechanism for blocking the bridge, revoking the presidential permit, would expose the United States to international legal liability and signal to every foreign government that signed infrastructure agreements with Washington that those agreements can be revoked at the request of a competing billionaire. This is not 1980s real estate logic applied to a 2020s networked world. This is 1880s railroad baron logic applied to a 21st century integrated supply chain architecture. The world does not work this way anymore, and the nations watching Washington operate this way are drawing conclusions. Roy Norton, a former Canadian consul general in Detroit who spent years lobbying Michigan to accept a bridge paid for entirely by Canada, said, "This is a triumph of common sense." He was talking about the bridge's construction, but that phrase has taken on a second meaning in February 2026. Because what Carney demonstrated, standing at a press conference correcting a nearly 300-word Truth Social post with 3 sentences of documented fact, is exactly that. Common sense. Calmly delivered, devastating in its simplicity. Canada paid for it. Michigan owns half. The bridge opens. That is the 3-word answer, in essence. And Washington has not had a coherent response to it yet. Now watch for 3 things. First, watch the presidential permit. The administration signaled it may review it. If Trump moves to revoke that permit, it triggers legal action from both Michigan and Canada simultaneously. Michigan Governor Whitmer has been unambiguous. It's going to open one way or another, and the governor looks forward to attending the ribbon cutting. A Republican state, a Republican negotiated deal, a Republican former governor publicly opposing the president's position. That is not the coalition of resistance Trump expected. Watch how far he pushes. Second, watch the Moran investigation. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are investigating, and if Moran does not respond to document requests by March 4th, Democrats could attempt to trigger a subpoena vote. The subpoena vote is a long shot in a Republican-controlled House. But the investigation is on the record. The timeline is on the record. The donation is on the record. $1 million, January 16th. The meeting, February 9th. The post, February 9th. When congressional investigators put that timeline in front of the American public with documentary evidence, the political cost of maintaining the bridge blockade escalates sharply. Third, watch Michigan. Trump narrowly won this state in 2024. Michigan is an automotive state. Parts cross the border constantly, and they need to get there on time, or cars cannot be built. The workers who built the Gordie Howe Bridge are union members. The manufacturers who depend on the corridor are Michigan companies. The Republicans who negotiated the deal are Michigan Republicans. If the administration actually blocks the bridge, if it moves from social media threat to legal action, the economic consequences land in a swing state that Trump cannot afford to lose. That calculation has not changed. Here is what this moment means at the level of history. The Gordie Howe International Bridge took over 2 decades to plan, negotiate, and build. It survived legal challenges from a billionaire family. It survived a global pandemic. It survived supply chain disruptions, cost overruns, construction delays, and a trade war that began before a single cable was strung across that river. Canada paid $6.4 billion in the face of every obstacle because the economic logic of the crossing is unassailable. 1/4 of all United States-Canada trade flows through that corridor. The automotive supply chains of both nations depend on that river. The case for the bridge was not political. It was mathematical. And the math does not change because a man posted on Truth Social. The empire does not always fall to invaders. And sometimes it simply negotiates against its own infrastructure at the request of a billionaire donor based on facts it never checked, and then watches its closest ally calmly present the documents that make the ultimatum collapse. Canada built the bridge. Canada paid for the bridge. And on a Tuesday morning in February 2026, Canada's Prime Minister, a former central banker who has navigated currency crises, financial collapses, and now a trade war with the largest economy on earth, stood in front of cameras and said so. 3 words: calm, precise, devastating. Subscribe. Stay tuned. The geography of North American power is being redrawn right now, one bridge at a time, and the receipts are already public. History is moving fast. Make sure you're watching.